It's not just Innsmouth, you know. It's spreading. One day all of America will be deep ones, and then Dagon will be happy, and then one day Dagon will let me rest. Until then, I use my time wisely. I waste no time in getting new disciples to join the esoteric order of Dagon. Right now, I wait patiently for our newest member to arrive. She is a sweet girl, just married, just moved here with her new husband. Soon she will be ours. Soon she will be deep.
Reverend Marsh, am I too early?
No, Ruth, you're just in time.
Father Dagon, Season 2, produced by Dreadfuls Theatre and original soundtrack by Caesar. If you haven't done so already, head on over to iTunes to rate and review the podcast, or tell your friends about us on Twitter and Facebook. This is Episode 4, Death Mask, written by Victoria Snaith.
The night before my inauguration into the church, I had a dream that my father and I spoke on the telephone. I was in the living room of my new home here in Innsmouth, but like in all dreams, it wasn't quite as it looked in real life. The wallpaper was off, and I'm sure the floor was carpeted when, in reality, the house had a wooden floor. The phone rang, and I picked it up. My father was on the other end of the line. He used my full name, Ruth Mary Winters. He only ever called me that when I was in trouble. On waking from the dream, I thought about that name, my maiden name, Winters. I felt a brief pang of regret that my parents weren't present for my wedding to Donald. How disappointed they would be if they knew that I had left university to marry him. Maybe they did know. I wonder if they looked for me. The feelings of disappointment towards their absence quickly passed. My parents had shown no interest in getting to know Donald. In their eyes, I would always be little Ruthie Winters with hair in bunches, tied up with neat yellow ribbons, the overachiever in elementary school, top of the gifted and talented program in high school, and one of only a few female students to ever attend Miskatonic University. I would always be the little girl they pushed and pushed to be smart and studious, and put academics before anything else, despite any unhappiness or unwilling I showed. Not anymore, though. Ruth Winters is long gone, and in her place is Ruth Solomon, wife of Donald Solomon. And on that morning, I was to become a fully fledged member of the esoteric order of Dagon. It seems strange to me that I knew so little of the order before meeting Donald. Now that I understand the order, I understand me. I found my place with Dagon, and I have my sweet Donald and the Reverend Obed Marsh to thank for that. Blessed is the man who trusts in Father Dagon, whose confidence is in him. It is without a doubt that when traveling through life, one will encounter troubles. No life is smooth sailing from start to finish, which is just a fact that we must all accept. Sometimes it may seem like trouble is on every side. At times it may feel like we cannot catch a break, stop to rest, be given a chance to pause. Into whom do you put your trust when life is falling apart? You see, sometimes we put our trust in the wrong hands. Sometimes we trust the wrong person to get us through a hardship in our lives. There is only one being that we can truly trust to get us through the hard times. That one being's name is Dagon. Anything that we go through here on this earth, he can help us through it. There is not a pain or a sorrow, nor a situation that Dagon cannot bring you through. If Dagon brought us to it, he can bring us through it. I admit I was in a dark place before I knew Dagon. Miskatonic University was a struggle and a strain on me. I told everyone that I was capable. I believed I was capable. But that was a lie. People believed I was happy, but Donald and our Innsmouth community helped me realize that I was not happy. Happiness comes from faith and devotion, from knowing that Dagon has a plan for me. The plan was not clear to me until after my inauguration. I am ashamed to admit that even after my marriage to Donald, I still did not truly understand the principles of the Order of Dagon, or what would be expected of me if I was to join. I remember asking Don if he could explain to me what the order meant, how it came about. Did it have commandments? Was there a type of religious text or book I could read? I asked the neighbors the same questions, and every time I got the same whispered answers, words that meant nothing to me. But now I see these words in hushed tones. If you lean in closer, I will tell them to you. It's beautiful, isn't it? The language of Dagon. I'm so glad I get to share it with you. After the inauguration at the church, I opened my eyes and found myself sat upon the floor, the Reverend Marsh's arms wrapped around me. He told me that Dagon had chosen me, that not many people had chosen in this way. He told me that after I recited my verses, I began to convulse. He said at first he was concerned, but then he could see that Dagon was communicating with me. He caught me as my body fell to the ground. I could tell he wasn't lying to me. I could feel the difference in my whole body. I felt strong, seductive, new. I understood my mission as a disciple of Dagon, a deep one as we are called, although I still have far to go in my journey before I am truly considered a deep one. Finally, I understood what I had to do. I had been transformed under the eye of Dagon. I had been chosen to spread his seed and spread his children. Dagon will have more followers. I won't let him down. After taking a moment to compose myself, I thanked Reverend Marsh for his support and left the church. I needed time to reflect on what had happened to me before I started my mission. I was keen to tell Donald everything that had happened, but I knew I wouldn't see him until later that evening. I left the church, stopped for a moment on a bench near the bus station to consider my next move, and then decided to take a walk down to the beach. The Innsmouth beach is not what you'd expect. The town itself is quite run down, but the beach is strangely lovely. It's sand, not pebbles like I thought it might be when I first arrived with Don, and the water is oddly warm. Perhaps warm is an over-exaggeration, but it's not cold. Since moving here, the beach has often been a place of solace for me. As I stepped down from the promenade onto the sand, I realized I wasn't wearing any shoes. I didn't recall taking them off, but obviously I had. I let my toes sink beneath the dry, fine sand just for a moment, and then started walking down towards the sea. The beach leveled out, and I was about to walk to my favorite spot when I saw George's white rowing boat lying on its side on the sand. I didn't know George that well, but we had met a number of times at church. He was a quiet fellow, ran a small convenience store in town, but was a devout follower of Dagon. How exciting! My first opportunity to talk with someone about my awakening. I was sure he would be pleased to hear that I was now a true and complete believer, a convert. But that was when I saw something towards the rocks. It looked like a body, the unmistakable shape of a human body floating motionless in the still ocean water. I didn't hesitate. I waded out as far as I could and began to swim. The sea was oddly still, so getting to the mysterious figure was easier than I had expected. I pulled the body back to shore, not daring to look at who it was until we reached dry land. I'm sure you've already guessed who. I rolled the body over and George's lifeless eyes looked back at me. But it wasn't his eyes that I saw first. It took me a moment to identify that it was George at all, because when I turned over the body, the first thing that drew my attention was the fact that this man had been cut from chin to stomach, like a goddamn fish. What monster did this? Who dare attack a member of my church, of the Order? This man was a good, kind follower of Dagon, and someone had done this to him. I realized that the body should not have been removed from the ocean. Father Dagon and Mother Hydra needed to reclaim this body, take it back to our promised land of Yahan-Nathli, so that George may find peace. I looked back out into the ocean. It was so still and unmoving that George's body stood almost no chance of floating out on its own. But I couldn't leave him here and wait for the tide to claim him. His body was already beginning to decompose, and I was not going to let scavenging animals feast on him in the meantime. His body was too heavy out of the water for me to move. If I'd had more time to prepare, or someone to help me, I could have moved the body in the fishing boat, taken it back out to sea and drop him back in. Maybe tie rocks to his body to help him sink. The best I could do was to cover him in sand and hope that the seagulls would not peck out his eyes. I piled sand up around his body, closing his eyes before encasing his face. Hardly seemed like an honorable funeral for a devoted disciple. I searched the immediate area for anything I could use to decorate the mound. Some shells, a worn-down piece of glass that had become frosted and smooth around the edges, and seaweed. I used the seaweed to give the impression of hair. I placed 2 shells upon the face for eyes, and the glass I stuck upwards for a nose. A poor man's death mask at a poor man's funeral. I took a moment of silence. A soft wind blew, and with it came the sound of someone crying, sobbing. I listened. It sounded like a man. The soft wind blew again, and this time, not only did it carry the sound of the man's crying, but the smell of George. It was such a peculiar situation to know that this person who was out of sight was connected to George. I turned and made my way back towards the promenade, walking up and over the sand dunes, following the sound and the smell of this person. It was a man. A drunk, crying, sniveling man. No one I'd ever seen before. And yet the scent of George was all over him, and although this man's clothes were navy blue, I was sure I could see blood in the fabric. The skin around and under his fingernails looked stained. I was sure this man was a murderer. I stood over him. He didn't notice, too busy crying into his bottle of booze. I thought about all the ways I could make him suffer. Make him beg to his God for mercy. Make him beg to my God for mercy. I reached my hand out towards his face. I planned to grab him by the neck and squeeze. But just as my fingers grazed his beard, he looked at me. "Fran," he said, his eyes a mix of pain and longing. I should have strangled him there and then, but I couldn't. "I'm not Fran," I tried to say, but in his eyes, I saw my reflection as he saw me. I was Fran. I could use this. I took him by the hand and asked him to follow me. "Where are we going?" he asked through a drunken slur. "I'm taking you home, sailor boy. I'm taking you home."
You have been listening to Father Dagon Season 2, Episode 4, Death Mask. Obed Marsh was played by Hayden Davis. Ruth Winters was played by Catherine Brown, and the music was created by Caesar. At the end of each episode, you can hear the soundtrack from today's episode in full without the script. We suggest playing the soundtrack in the background while you woo a crying but highly available sailor. Tears are totally in this season. But before the music, a quick message from two writers with whom I'm sure you're very familiar.
Good evening. My name is Howard Phillips Lovecraft.
And I'm Edgar Allan Poe.
Calling all horror fans, we would cordially like to invite you to our show, Providence.
The Shadow over Lovecraft. Hey, that's you!
That is me indeed.
We're gonna be on at the Edinburgh Festival at the Assembly Rooms every day in August.
5 p.m. sharp.
The show's about my glum friend here and how he wrote the greatest horror stories since, well, me! Not to mention the tentacles, the tragic family history, the racism.
I assure you it will have many laughs.
It's gonna be scary, too. Wait till you see the price of the tickets.
He's joking. They're very cheap.
Check it out for yourself at www.assemblyfestival.com.
Or you can call the concierge on 0131 623 3030. Be sure to ask for Providence.
We hope to see you there.
Thank you sincerely for listening and for heeding the call.
If you haven't done so already, head on over to iTunes to rate and review the podcast, or tell your friends about us on Twitter and Facebook. This week's Monster of the Week is
Raven Shadows.
a kind of early form of mermaid or merman.
Raven Shadows.
Is mentioned in Sumerian mythology.
Raven Shadow
is one of a number of spirits, originally servants to the god of wisdom. Like the centaurs of Greek mythology who helped to civilize humanity, the task of
Raven Shadows
was to teach the arts and sciences to humanity. They did this during the day while fasting, only stopping to eat at night. Early carved reliefs of
Raven Shadows
show them as men above the waist and fish below.